James Webb. James Webb Telescope and James Webb.
Yeah.
Before we get into James Webb and all that good stuff, let me say this. We're getting to the point where science is no longer becoming the trump card for atheists, it's actually becoming their Achilles heel. Listen to Stephen Meyer discuss the scientific discoveries that prove, you guessed it, a beginning.
Media reports suggesting that the findings of the James Webb Telescope have undermined the case for the Big Bang. But there's an interesting backstory on this. Most of these media reports were based on the writings of a single physics researcher named Eric Lerner, who's been, since 1990, kind of carrying a torch to refute the Big Bang. One of his articles quoted a University of Kansas astrophysicist saying that she stays up late at night wondering if, based on the James Webb, that everything that we know is turning out to be false. Turns out that researcher, that astrophysicist, disclaimed his use of the quote, explaining that he took it completely out of context, that she was talking about theories of galaxy formation, not about whether or not there had been a Big Bang, and not about whether or not the universe is expanding as we would expect.
So he's confirmation bias.
Yeah, and in a sense also taking somebody way out of context to make a point of his own. You know, he misused the quotation
on purpose,
apparently. And there have been a number of leading astrophysicists. In fact, people who would like to know more about this, I'd recommend Brian Keating from University of California, San Diego, great astrophysicist, has been writing about this. But here's the short story. I wrote an op-ed in the Daily Wired distilling some of this stuff. What the James Webb Telescope is able to do is to, in fact, what it was constructed to do was to detect extremely long wavelength radiation, stuff that's outside the visible range. I call it uber redshifted. It's actually in the infrared range is the more accurate physics term. So it's looking for very long wavelength radiation coming from galaxies that are very, very far out there. Now, why would it be looking for that? Well, because if the universe is expanding as we would expect based on the Big Bang theory, then the radiation coming from things very, very far out in space and therefore very far back in time should be very stretched out, more stretched out than stuff that's closer at hand. So the James Webb was constructed in hopes of detecting that type of radiation if it existed. It's not assuming that it necessarily would, but it would be a way of confirming the expansion of the universe has been going on for a very long time. And in order to do that, the NASA people created some amazing technology. They supercooled the detection technology, or the detection apparatus, to I think 5, 6, 7 degrees above absolute zero, so that the heat coming off of the instrument itself was not creating infrared that would interfere. And what they were in fact able to detect from these very ancient, very distant galaxies was super redshifted radiation, uber redshifted stuff out in the infrared. And we're able, on the basis of that, to synthesize images of these very, very distant remote galaxies. Now, the very fact that they were able to do that confirms that you have that what you would expect on the basis of the Big Bang theory, that the amount of redshift that you would expect to be present if, in fact, the galaxies had been expanding throughout that vast stretch of time was, in fact, present and was detected. Now, that didn't get reported. The whole focus was on the fact that there were galaxies that were more mature, there were more of them early on than we would have expected based on our theories of galaxy formation. And so those are anomalies that need to be addressed and have not yet been explained, as I understand it. Maybe the astrophysicists have made more progress on that in even recent days. But the basic picture of an expanding universe outward from a beginning has not been undermined, but rather confirmed in a very dramatic way. I think it's a rather dramatic confirmation. There have been many others, the cosmic background radiation that was discovered in 1965, the COBE radiation that George Smoot discovered in the 90s. So there's been this pattern of confirming evidence of this basic picture of an expanding universe outward from a beginning in observational astronomy from the 20s right up till now. And so that, I think, gives us good reason to think best we can tell the universe had a beginning.
Can I pause you on that? What is the when she was discussing the formation of galaxies, what had thrown that into question? Like what was about the formation of galaxies that undermined previous ideas?
As I understand it, it's that there are more galaxies that formed earlier and are more mature than we would have expected, because they were able to look back to 13.5, 13.6 billion years ago. They think the origin of the universe is about 13.8 billion years ago. So apparently galaxies were forming faster than we would have expected. And I think that's the anomaly that is on the table.
But is it possible that with further detection, we can, with new data, have a better understanding of what is actually going on rather than just saying it all points to this thing?
Yeah, it's always possible that we can change our minds on things because science is always provisional. But there are many stable theories that have persisted because of a preponderance of evidence that points to and continues to point to the same conclusion. And I think we've had 100 years now where we've had repeated new types of observations that point towards a beginning. And there are two other classes of two other developments in theoretical physics that also, I think, reinforce this, that I also wrote about in the book. One is the singularity theorems that Hawking and Penrose and George Ellis proved in the 1960s and 70s. And then there's something called the Borde-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, which I think is even a tighter physics proof of a beginning. So Hawking is doing black hole physics for his PhD in the 1960s. And he's at Cambridge, and he's having these neurological symptoms, and he's diagnosed with ALS. He gets very, very discouraged. He thinks he's going to quit. And he's encouraged to press on by close friends, and he does. And he ends up writing this brilliant thesis where he has one chapter where he's thinking about what the cosmologists are talking about, is that we've got this expanding universe, and if the universe is expanding in the forward direction of time, then matter is getting more and more diffuse over time. Now, part of his thesis involves general relativity, Einstein's theory of gravity. And according to Einstein, a massive body actually curves the fabric of space or space-time. So if you're going in the forward direction of time, space is getting less and less curved, and matter more and more diffuse. But if you're going in the reverse direction of time, the matter is getting more and more densely concentrated at every successive point in the finite past until, again, you reach a limiting case where the matter gets so densely concentrated that space gets so tightly curved that it can't get any more tightly curved. It can't get any more densely concentrated. And you move towards a point of infinite density and infinite curvature. You get to a limiting case. Now, infinite curvature corresponds to zero spatial volume. And so the picture of the origin of the universe that sort of intuitively flows from this is one where you get not just matter and energy arising, but space and time come into existence at that 0 point. And he presents this in his PhD thesis. The story of this is told really nicely in the little film, The Theory of Everything. And he's fear and trepidation, getting examined, but one of his examiner, they're nitpicking all these different things, but then they say, hey, the idea of a black hole at the beginning of the universe, a space-time singularity, this is brilliant, congratulations, Dr. Hawking, and they shove the thesis book back over to him, and he's passed. But one of them says, now go work out the maths. And he ends up working out the math of this intuitive proof that he develops with Sir Roger Penrose, with whom you have done a wonderful interview, and George Ellis, whom I've had the occasion to meet. And so they end up producing several of these singularity theorems, suggesting that if general relativity is true, then there must have been a beginning. This is on grounds independent of all the things from observational astronomy. Now, there's a loophole with that, and that is that in the very tiniest smidgens of space-time, inside 10 to the minus 43rd of a second, or what they call Planck time, quantum effects might have been such that we would have to alter our ideas of how gravity worked. And so out of that has come something called an impulse or different theories of what are called quantum gravity or quantum cosmology. And I think you've had some conversations on this show about that as well.
Sure.
In my book, I show that is another possible cosmological model. But like the conclusion that the universe had a definite beginning, I think those models also have theistic implications, and I can explain why.
Okay.
Maybe we would bracket that.
Okay.
Then there's yet a third proof, though, of a beginning that by three physicists, Borde, Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin. And it's not based on general relativity. It's not based on ideas of what gravity was like in the early universe, but based on ideas of special relativity. It's a little tricky to explain easily, but basically they show that there is, again, a limiting case and therefore a definite beginning to time, and therefore, and that it does not have the same loophole that the singularity theorems of Hawking and Penrose. So what I've said in what I argue in the book is that a body of evidence from observational astronomy, a strong indicator from theoretical physics, namely the singularity theorems of Hawking et al., and then a very compelling proof from Bortguth and Vilenkin all point to the same conclusion, that as best we can tell, the universe had a beginning.
I think this is a strong conversation that really points to the obvious fact that the universe had a starting point. I think this is great information. I think it's something to ponder. You know, the Bible says that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, we may not agree on the Big Bang Theory. I'm a pastor. I don't preach the Big Bang Theory, but we can all agree that the universe had a starting point. It had a beginning. The question is, if the universe had a beginning, how did all this matter, time, energy, how did it come into existence ex nihilo? How? What mechanism? How is that even physically possible? Naturally possible? It's not. According to the laws of physics, it's not possible. So there has to be a spiritual or a supernatural component that brought these things into existence. Now, the Bible tells us, Genesis 1:1, it was God who created the heavens and the earth. Exodus 20:11 says he created the heavens, the earth, the seas, and all that is in them. So we believe that it was God who did this, Yahweh. All right. You don't got to call him Yahweh, but you do have to admit that if the universe had a beginning, there has to be a uncaused first cause. The universe is the effect. Everything with an effect has a cause. So what caused the universe to come into existence? It cannot be made of the universe. It cannot be made of the material of the universe. Science says that's not possible. So it has to be a supernatural explanation. A shout out to Joe Rogan for hosting Stephen Meyer. Thank you, Stephen Meyer, for sharing this amazing information. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section about this conversation, about the uncaused first cause, and the fact that science is pointing to a beginning and the implications of that. And be sure to go over to my Facebook page and follow me over there. You can find some more videos that are edifying and encouraging for you. Peace. If you enjoyed this video, you want more content like this, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel. Like this video. I'll be back next week with another one. This is Pastor Frederick, and everything I do is by the book.